everyone, welcome back. Issues of Sal.
I'm Ethan.
I'm Ben.
I've been waiting for this. Get ready for the lowest viewed episode in the channel's history. It's the Simpsons Futurama crossover crisis. This is a two-part. That is to say, there was one, and then they did a sequel.
What?
Crossover comic book of The Simpsons and Futurama.
This was the original.
This is the original crossover. Like the real, true, in-canon crossover between The Simpsons and Futurama, long before they actually ended up doing it on the show.
Right.
Because no one could have foreseen that Futurama was going to get brought back twice. Enough for The Simpsons to actually have those characters interact, outside of a few tangential references here or there. So there was a Simpsons comic book for a good long time, since the early 90s, published by a small imprint known as Bongo Comics. And Bongo Comics essentially, it existed exclusively to print matte graining vehicles like The Simpsons, Futurama, and Binky, and so forth. And so, yeah, there was already a Simpsons comic that was going on. In fact, the first issue won an Eisner.
What?
And yeah.
I think just because the series was probably so popular.
I mean, no, the Eisners is a popularity contest, but I would say it's actually more like an inverse popularity contest. Like, the less popular your book, the more likely you are to win an Eisner.
Oh, I'm not saying the book is popular. I'm saying the IP is popular.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah. I love this collection. Look at this. Like, you could actually, it's die cut. You could switch it around so that the Simpsons interact with the Futurama gang or vice versa.
Yeah.
But anyway,
I've seen this on your shelf for years.
Yeah, it's been on my shelf for years.
I never thought we'd do it on the show.
Me either.
I love it because I've never seen this before.
No.
Never paid attention to it.
Yeah.
I didn't give it any thought.
I love this. And what's more is it has all of the hallmarks of the best parts of both franchises. Like, in terms of humor, character, they get it. And it works. This is written by Ian Boothby with pencils primarily by James Lloyd. And I remember as a kid gleaning Simpsons comics. Like, I was, and I think it's fair to say everyone on this couch has been a Simpsons fan.
Oh, yeah. I even had a Bartman comic.
Yeah.
When I was
they made
growing up.
Bartman comics, they made Radioactive Man comics. Like, they did that.
That's fun.
I know, and I'm like, that's so cool. It's like almost like in-world stuff.
Yeah.
And as a kid, I remember seeing these comics and going like, how could they possibly be as good as the show?
How dare you?
How dare you? There's one Simpsons and it's a cartoon show, and statistically speaking, I hate the show because I like fewer episodes than there are episodes.
That's only because of how long it's run.
That's exactly
If we go up until like 99.
Yeah, no, if we go...
I love all the Simpsons.
I love The Simpsons seasons 1 through 9. And 9 is a stretch. I leave 9 in there so I don't seem like such a curmudgeon. But there are a couple episodes in 9 that shouldn't exist. It's when the show died. Season 9 is when they killed the show. And I know there's 1,000 comments being like, how dare you?
Yeah.
It only got good around season 20.
What a dated opinion.
Exactly. And it's like, I've had this argument. I've been arguing with longtime Simpsons fans since I stopped liking the show. I had a altercation with what was purported to be like a new friend in the parking lot of a putt-putt golf course over this opinion. Like, it almost came to blows. And by the way, not for me. People might assume that I might just be so short-fused.
Aggressor.
Yeah.
No, I was.
He was just like...
I've been so sick of saying I don't like The Simpsons and being shouted down that he went off about how The Simpsons never was good until it got to like season 11 or 12. And I was just like, I don't necessarily agree. It's something I never say. I was like, you know what?
I don't want to have this fight right now.
I have a new girlfriend who would become my wife later, and I don't want to look like a lunatic in front of her just yet. So I'm just gonna say, I'm like, you know what? Agree to disagree, my friend. I like The Simpsons from the beginning to season 9, but if you like that,
his own.
that's.
And he's like, no.
And he said, well, I guess it's just too smart for you. Like,
so then I roundhouse kicked him.
As I rained blows upon him, I knew there had to be another way. No, I was just like,
funny.
I was just like, why are you being so aggressive? He went out of the gate swinging, and maybe it's because he was always on the other side of the argument. Right. He'd be like, I don't think The Simpsons ever got good until season like 12 or 13, and people were like, well, that's because you're a friggin' idiot.
Right.
And he's like, no, I am not an idiot. You're the idiot.
I've always felt this way, and I'm right.
The problem is your weak response
was like,
told him like, oh,
I can dominate
this guy.
This guy, he's condescending to me. He thinks he's better than me, but I know I'm better than him.
I can overwhelm him.
Yeah. And
He'll just back down.
Right. And I didn't. I was just like, nah, I just disagree. But that's okay. I was like, don't worry about it, man. I don't really care. And he's like, and he just got really, and they had to leave. Like his friend was like, well, we should probably get out of here. And I'm like, all right, well, see you later, I guess. Bye forever.
Yeah, I'm never talking to you again. You psycho.
And we never did.
I was at that pop-up call, and I was upset about The Simpsons.
What are you talking about? Well, I'm meaning to do this to you. No, it was weird. So I don't really talk about The Simpsons. There's like a ever expanding list of properties and IPs that I just don't talk about in public anymore.
It's not worth it.
It's just not worth it.
It's not worth it.
It's not worth it.
Hey, where's the Disenchanted crossover?
I don't think they're going to do that.
I have another strong opinion that I will share because it's my show, is that Futurama should never have come back.
Oh, shots fired at future
I'll say this,
seasons
I haven't
of Futurama.
seen any of the new seasons.
Right.
I haven't
You haven't seen it both times it came back?
It came back twice?
Yeah.
Yeah, they brought it back in the form of direct-to-DVD movies that they split up into a season.
Yeah, I didn't see any of that.
And then they brought it back. And then they brought it back on Hulu. And yeah.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything.
Some of them are fine. They're fine. Like, I was okay with it being dead.
Right.
And, okay, to be honest.
I moved on.
To be honest with you, I actually never gave Futurama a chance.
Really?
Yes.
Like from the get-go?
Yes, from the jump. And here's why. I remember vividly watching the premiere of Futurama. It came on right after The Simpsons.
Right.
And the episode of The Simpsons that aired right before Futurama sucked. And I was so upset. And then Futurama came on, and I saw familiar names associated with Futurama, and I realized that people jumped ship from The Simpsons to Futurama. This new show siphoned the people that made The Simpsons good. And I
poachers.
was so angry, especially because Futurama was pretty funny. And I was like, no, and I just didn't watch it. And I didn't.
rejected
I
it.
watched the first episode, and then I watched the last episode. I never watched Futurama at all
during
between
its
its
original
entire
run.
run, except the first and last episodes
Wow.
when they aired.
Huh.
Yeah, and then I saw the last episode and I was like, "Oh my god, this show is great!" And then I went back and thanks
it goes
to
somewhere.
Yeah, it was a great show. It's so funny. I have every DVD and I loved it. So I found some appreciation for that series after it died, but I also didn't like any of the DVD movies. They were progressively worse. Like the first one was fine. Bender's Big Score. It was like, okay, although it was gross and weird. And then it got worse and worse, and I'm like, okay, I have to get off.
Right.
And it's like,
I guess I'm done.
There's something to be said for like letting a franchise go.
Yeah, but most people aren't good at that.
They're not capable of that. or it's like they're not trained to do that. I think it's like, you used to be. I mean, we wouldn't have franchises that we won't let die today if we didn't let them go when they were invented in the 80s. Yeah, you have to come up with an idea like RoboCop or Indiana Jones, but you have to also let them end.
No, let's make RoboCop again. Let's make another new RoboCop.
They're making another RoboCop movie, but they're bringing back Peter Weller.
Oh, so they're going to pretend.
So it's going to be like a
the other one didn't
requel
happen.
of
okay.
RoboCop, and I'm like, don't.
Yeah, just don't.
Just
It's
don't.
fine.
Just don't.
It's fine.
Because it's never succeeded.
I love Bender shitting a brick.
Oh my god.
And I love that it's covered on the cover
Yeah.
so you don't see
So you
it.
can get away with it.
Yep.
This is a perfect crossover in comic form, but it also is a great Simpsons Futurama crossover, but it's not a great Futurama Simpsons crossover for the show, because this essentially says that The Simpsons exists as a comic book, and Futurama is the real world.
Well, that makes sense because how
Oh.
can everybody be yellow?
We just ignore that when that happens. Or if you come on The Simpsons, you become yellow. Like the Critic when he crossed over with The Simpsons.
Yeah.
And that being said, by the way, Matt Groening was integral to this process. Like, he drew a picture of Fry and Bart skateboarding to commemorate this crossover.
Yeah, with rocket skateboards.
With
much
rocket
like
skateboards.
Back to the Future 2.
Yeah, it's true. And he wrote the foreword to this collection, which, if it's even in print, is in the comments below. But he's just like, I love this. And yet, when A Star Is Burns, the episode that actually crossed over The Critic and The Simpsons, was in development, Matt Groening refused to allow his name to be on the episode. So incensed and offended
he just hated
was
the Critic so much.
I think I think he didn't believe in the idea of like that kind of
that's
like,
stupid.
That's just a terrible premise. Like it's gross, and it's also just so commercial and devoid of context. It's a great episode. It is one of the funniest episodes, and his name is not it yet. It's on this comic book crossover.
Because he invented
both
of them.
And that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Yep.
He's like, no, I don't want it to have anything to do with The Critic because The Critic wasn't something I made up myself.
Right.
The Critic is funny as hell, by
Yes.
the way. Woefully underappreciated. So the Simpsons Futurama crossover is, the Futurama is the real world, The Simpsons is a comic book, but we're also going to treat them like they're real, whatever.
Interesting.
So
I mean, that happens with comic books.
Yeah.
We treat our characters like they're real. When they go through something trying and hard, we feel for them. When
Yeah.
they triumph, we're happy for them.
True, but the Futurama gang is reading a Simpsons comic book, and that's the Simpsons that cross over with them.
Like the literal ones that they're reading
Yes.
show up in their world.
They have to jump into the comic book in order to interact with the Simpsons. Yeah. And it's something they would never do for the show, and it's something they didn't do when they inevitably did do a crossover, because that would be weird. But also,
it
this
makes
is
sense in
intrinsically
this,
part of it because it's a comic book.
right? Because
Okay.
there was a Simpsons comic book, and
Yes.
this is a comic book. So
If you were
Yeah.
going to
Yeah.
do this premise,
As a
you
show,
have to make it a movie.
yeah.
There's no way to do a
mean,
22-minute episode.
They did a show, and it wasn't great. So Kent Brockman is introducing a mayoral debate between Diamond Joe Quimby and Snowball 2.
okay.
Yep. And by the way, this is the worst book to do on the show because the jokes are great. The plot is razor thin. It doesn't really matter, but I wanted to
Right.
try it anyway. I wanted to see if we could do it.
see what
But the
happens.
gags are so choice. Like they work so well. Like Snowball 2 starts winning the crowd's favor because he's playing with a ball of yarn. And Lisa essentially gives Quimby credit for not
stooping to his level.
and then Quimby is playing with a giant ball of yarn, which he then loses track of, which then falls on children. Like,
These are the jokes.
that's exactly my kind of thing. I'm like, yep, that's Simpsons for me.
It's a great visual gag, classic Simpsons.
Yep.
Like, it's a
Quimby-
hilarious idea.
Yep.
Set up brilliantly.
Yeah.
By someone saying, "Well, you're not going to do that. That would
And
be
then he
crazy." And then, he
does.
does it. Yeah.
And he falls on children. Like,
Yeah.
it's just,
It just keeps getting
It
worse.
just keeps getting worse, and then we pull back, and Fry is reading that comic book we just read on the bridge of Planet Express ship, and Bender's like, "Hey, your movie isn't moving. I'll fix it," and he just punches Fry. So Leela and company are going on a delivery to Nerdanus 12, where they're going to deliver comic books that are going to be dipped in diamond so that they can be preserved for all time.
God damn it.
Yes. It's
And
awesome.
Fry laments this because we know that Fry does have a real soft spot for physical media because he also has a problem with the loss of the Star Trek concept in the Star Trek Wars, which is not to be confused with the mass migration of Star Wars fans, the Star Wars Trek. Anyway, so they're going. So they go to the nerd planet, which of course is a giant nerd, like it's Ego, the living planet.
Yeah.
If Ego were a nerd.
Yeah, with like
and-
glasses made of rock.
Yeah, he's like, hi, and he's got a moon, and the moon is action figure, don't call them dolls moon. We don't go to that moon, but it's okay, and we
Right.
see that, like,
We see it's there. That's what
all these different, like, references to, comic book legends, and they're in the form of those disembodied heads that are also in jars. Like,
Yep.
okay, we see Jack Kirby and Stan and Will Eisner and Scott McCloud and stuff.
fun.
So they start loading the comic books off the ship and onto the planet when they are zapped by the brains from the previous episodes of The Day the Earth Stood Stupid. If you recall, the evil brain spawn show up. They're the cursed enemies of the Niblonians, which Nibbler Leela's pet is actually a race of, and he's actually in disguise. So this takes place after that.
Yeah, we find out he can talk.
A lot of
Yeah,
references.
that's right. Yeah. You need it's deep cuts. You need to know your Futurama lore. But suffice it to say,
Which means we've lost more of you already.
yeah, I know. I'm sorry, but if you're still here you go. There's a race of beings. They're just giant brains, and they're bad guys.
And they're intelligent unless they get around Fry.
Yes, because Fry lacks the Delta brainwave because he's his own grandpa. Anyway,
That's a whole other thing.
and that's a whole other thing. But also, in the explanation of how Fry is different, the brain spawns emit like a kind of like mental wave that would make any opponent stupid, and it affects humans, robots, and some plants, but not Fry. So Leela and Bender are both rendered stupid, and Fry is, the only one who can combat them again. And in the previous episode where that happened, they end up jumping into books throughout the New York Public Library, and so we get a lot of fun references to books and characters of literature, and Fry and Leela interact with those characters, and it's a lot of fun. So obviously you could imagine we're going to do that here, but also there's a Bongo comic and not a Marvel or DC comic, though we do make references to both of them, but not here. Instead, they jump into the Simpsons comics they were transporting,
Right.
and so before that happens, of course, they go into the nearby comic books, and so Fry becomes like the shrimp in the ad for the muscle stuff they need to take, which we actually referenced in our Batman episode recently.
That's great.
And so,
Okay, so the real comics fans like
this is a fantastic deep cut, and they make a lot of jokes as a result.
The book moves on.
Yes.
And everyone gets turned into sperm and thrown in a book.
Yeah. Yeah, their spirits or something get blasted out of their corporeal bodies. We didn't need that. I don't know why they did it like that. They didn't do it in the episode. I don't know why it's depicted here like that. Anyway, the brain spawn essentially get one up on Fry, Leela, and Bender, and then Fry announces, even if we are defeated, the rest of my friends and family at Planet Express will defeat you. And the brain spawn are like, oh, okay. And so they go get the rest of the crew from Futurama, and then they are like, damn it, Fry, what the hell's wrong with you? And, of course, Nibbler is brought along as well, so Nibbler wakes up and he sees the brain spawn, and he forgets himself, and he actually identifies them through voice, which reveals to Leela that Nibbler has a higher degree of intelligence. And then Fry recognizes, if you dump us into another piece of literature, we'll still defeat you because I'm the protagonist, basically. And the brain's like, oh, that's right. You can beat us because every time we put you into a book, we follow. So we're just going to put you in the book and then leave you there. And then we'll have the books dipped in diamond and you'll be trapped there forever.
Okay.
And so they get dumped into the Simpsons comic you were reading.
See, this is why you shouldn't preserve your comics in a sarcophagus.
That's right.
Because it might be trapping someone who's been teleported into the book forever.
Given that highly likely scenario, I think it's food for thought. So we go back to the beginning of the Simpsons comic where there's the debate between Quimby and Snowball, but now the Futurama gang is in the crowd with the Simpsons, and Fry is like, hey, I remember this, but because everyone was whammied by the brain spawn, they get temporary amnesia because we're doing a crossover. We want them to all dispersed throughout the town of Springfield, and that's really why we're doing this, and the book understands that, and they explain that in very obvious detail. And I gotta say, Boothby is amazing at... I remember reading the first issue of the Bongo comic, Simpsons comic, which, by the way, is also packaged in this collection. Yeah, they made a little sleeve to give you the first issue because they reference it later. Now, there's a lot of dialogue in the first several issues of the Simpsons comics because for them, they're like, we are doing the show in comic book form.
There's going to be a lot of words.
There's going to be a lot of words because it's like we're essentially giving you storyboards with dialogue. Boothby knows the format and is like, we got to cut to the chase. We got to use as little dialogue as possible, but the dialogue that is used has to be really funny. And so it's like, that's why it's so good and why it's so relatable. And it reminds me so much of classic Simpsons because it has to be as distilled and direct as possible. So anyway, they're aware of that. I'm just really impressed by Boothby's ability to capture both the voices of Futurama and Simpsons and also merge them. And also know that the reader is hyper aware of all conventions associated with the format we're using. There's a lot of levels here, which is exactly what makes for a good Simpsons or Futurama episode. So anyway, Fry is like, crap, I don't know what I'm going to do. The rest of the crew disperses along with the crowd because now that Quimby's been crushed by a giant yarn ball, there's no more debate to be had, and so everybody leaves. If you want, you can put it back.
Oh, yeah.
Gently.
It's got a bonus issue of
Yeah, you could flip it over and
Bart
get
Simpson's creepy crawly tales.
Yeah, it's like what?
And
Like just a little Treehouse of Horror kind of thing.
Is there actually an Itchy and Scratchy?
There is an Itchy and Scratchy comic, or there was. Mongo Comics entirely folded a few years ago.
Oh, that's too bad.
So Fry teams up with Nibbler, and Nibbler's like, okay, well, I wouldn't add anything to this story, so I'm going to try and use my mental powers to crack the diamond that imprisons us here. And Fry will go try and like assemble the rest of the crew. And so he leaves.
Oh, he doesn't have
They're
amnesia?
already encased. Wow.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It happened right away.
Right away. Well, we only have so many pages. So Nibbler realizes that what they need to do is essentially, because of the nature of this story, the crew that has been transported into the book will naturally seek out the protagonists of this comic. Fry, of course, doesn't know what protagonist means, and so Nibbler explains it means main character, and so Fry's like, well, that means it's The Simpsons, so I know where The Simpsons live because I've watched and read The Simpsons, and so he leaves to go look for them, while Nibbler uses his brain power to shatter the barrier.
Because it's a comic, do the people in the comic book, The Simpsons
They don't
universe
know they're in a
characters-
comic book.
Right, they don't know they're in a comic book. Do they accept the characters that are showing up
Yes. Yeah, they're
as
not
like face value, being like, yeah, it's a walking robot, but that's normal.
Yeah. Well, they don't. They in a way, they recognize that he is a robot and that they don't normally have one.
But they don't consider that fantastical or...
No.
Okay.
Same with Zoidberg.
Yes, that comes. Yes, everything gets an explanation.
Okay.
Like Bender obviously goes to Moe's because it's a bar and he's an alcoholic. So when he starts to get drinks, they ask him if he's Duff Beer's new mascot, and so he says he is, and so he gets free beer. Whereas Zoidberg is a horrible lobster man. He goes to the nuclear power plant, and Mr. Burns assumes that he is a human who was horribly irradiated.
An accident.
So Bender's getting ripped at Moe's, and Lenny and Carl and company are there. Homer comes out of the bathroom, and he's covered in water, and he's like, "Moe, have you got a towel?" And Moe says, "Homer, if you're not going to learn how to use the bidet, Moe has a bidet."
Of course he has a bidet.
I just love that. Like, no.
Well, I mean, he wouldn't. He doesn't like calling it a garage.
Either read the instructions on the wall or don't use the bidet. Exactly. He would call it something else, like the butt squirter or something. So Homer and Bender, of course, immediately become friends and go hang out with each other. Meanwhile, Fry goes to Springfield Elementary, where Scruffy, the janitor, gets hired as an assistant to groundskeeper Willie.
Sure. Was Scruffy's there?
Yeah, he got pulled in too.
Okay.
He was
Didn't see that
wrapped up
coming.
by
All right.
everyone from Planet Express was brought in by the Brain Spawn.
Right, okay.
So
I never considered Scruffy like a main character.
no,
yeah.
but like he is a janitor, like groundskeeper
Right. He
Willie.
would be there, yeah. And
But
there
that's
is a
the
counterpart.
allure of
Yeah.
Scruffy.
That's true. You don't
always
count on
there.
Scruffy, exactly.
Yeah.
So Skinner sees Fry and he assumes Fry's a teacher, so Fry just gets roped into that and he becomes the substitute teacher for Fry's
What?
class.
Okay.
Because Mrs. Krabappel coincidentally isn't there.
Okay. Skinner doesn't know who's in his... I guess he thinks he's a substitute,
Yeah,
so
that's
he
right.
wouldn't know him.
That's right, yeah.
Okay.
Fry sits down, there's a big fart, everybody laughs at the whoopee cushion that Bart put down in his seat, but of course he didn't put down the whoopee cushion, so Fry just farted. Classic. Leela steals sunglasses from Roy, to hide her one eye.
Right.
While Lisa is being tormented by her peers. So, Leela comes in and she offers to help out Lisa and basically says, like, you should just ignore them and stand up for yourself. And Lisa's like, so what are you, a guidance counselor? Because that's the worst advice I've ever heard. And I'm like, good call. Guidance counselors may be more useless than influencers. So they're the influencers of the education field.
Fired at counselors.
Oh no.
Yeah.
They know it.
Right. They know they're useless.
They know. And if they don't, they should be making a better example. So, so Leela, she's like, yeah, I'm a guidance counselor.
Yeah, sure that.
And so she goes over to talk to the little girls, and the girls make fun of her, and so she beats their ass and takes their lunch and gives it to Lisa.
Huh.
Meanwhile, Hermes and Zoidberg end up going to the nuclear power plant. Of course, they have...
Are their counterparts Lenny and Carl? Is that what's happening here?
No, because Lenny and Carl were
okay.
at the bar.
Oh.
Which also doesn't make any sense because, like, wait, is it a work day?
Yeah, they took the day off or something.
The nuclear power plant is always running.
That's fair.
Right, yeah,
Yeah,
maybe it's the middle of the night.
I mean, it is
Like-
no because they're
Oh,
at
no, it's-
school.
Oh, yeah. Whoops.
Doesn't matter.
Lenny and Carl work the night shift.
Yeah, because everybody has temporary amnesia. Zoidberg and Hermes know that they are connected in some way, but because they're the ones who are together, they assume that they're each other's best friend, as opposed to being treated with derision, which is exactly what Hermes would treat Zoidberg like.
Right.
So they start hugging and crying because they're reunited as best friends and they don't know anything. And Mr. Burns sees this on the closed circuit TV and basically is like, ooh, we got a lawsuit on our hands. We better treat that guy with respect and dignity because otherwise he might sue the plant for having been turned into a horrible lobster monster.
Right.
And so they invite him to dinner at his country club, and so that's what's going to happen over there. Meanwhile, Hermes meets Smithers and is enamored with Smithers' efficiency. And so they become friends.
Okay.
This is what happens at a crossover, folks.
Makes sense, I guess. Okay, so Leela is with Maggie.
No,
Lisa.
With
Lisa.
Yeah, Leela's with Lisa.
Bart is with
Fry.
Bender and Homer.
Yep. Hermes and Zoidberg are with
Mr. Burns.
Mr. Burns and Smithers.
Sure.
Yep. Scruffy's with Willie.
Well, okay. But who's going to be with Marge?
Yeah, well, Nibbler ends up getting picked up by Marge because Nibbler uses his powers to make Marge think that he's a baby, that someone abandoned.
Okay.
But Maggie sees him as himself and is horribly jealous of Nibbler's attention.
Okay.
Class ends and Fry asks Bart to stay after, and Bart's like, let me guess, you're going to try and relate to me because you're young and you've been there. And he's like, okay, well, since that's not going to work, my name's Fry, I'm from the future, and you are actually a comic book character, and I'm sucked in your book, and I got to get out. And he's like, wow, I really didn't see that coming. Well, at least I know I can drive a teacher crazy. Goodbye. And so he leaves, and Willie locks Fry in the school because Bart's the last student to leave, and Willie asks.
Well, that's what you do at the end of the day. You chain the door.
Chain the door closed.
As soon as the last student leaves, boom.
Yep.
That's it. Certainly the teachers don't hang out.
Oh, no.
Oh, they don't have work to do.
They don't have work to do after work.
Yeah.
No. Everybody just, definitely at Springfield and
They
America.
definitely leave before the students, so the students are alone in the building.
There's certainly not a fire exit somewhere.
Hell no. I love this bit between Scruffy and Willie because, of course, they're both seemingly idiots. But Scruffy says, all Scruffy's saying is the unification theory is just that, a theory. And Willie goes, but you canna convince me the quantum universe theorem is the end-all be-all, man. I'm like, okay. So they talk about quantum physics.
The opposite of what you would expect, yeah.
Meanwhile, Professor Farnsworth is just a doddering old man wandering through the middle of intersections until eventually he jury-rigs the stoplight to turn into a hologram of a sexy lady, which causes even more car accidents.
What?
It's just because he's like, well, I'm an inventor and I'm a genius, but I don't know who I am or where I am, so I'm just doodling with random bit bobs when I find them.
Okay.
Until eventually, he bumps into Chief Wiggum, and Wiggum has him committed and sent to the Springfield retirement home.
Right, where he's going to
be Grandpa, but really he won't because Grandpa and Farnsworth have nothing in common except that they're old.
Yeah, Farnsworth and the scientist.
Yes, Professor Fink, and they do. Yeah, don't worry. So that happens. Meanwhile, Bender gets thrown out of the bar because...
Where's Amy?
Oh, she shows up later.
Oh, okay.
And it's a great bit because you're like, yeah, no, Bender's cover of being the Duff Beer mascot should preclude him from ejection from the bar, but Mo mentions I saw what you were doing to the love tester machine. Bender reveals that he doesn't have a place to stay, and Homer's like, you're my best friend, and I promise you I'm going to give you, a place to stay. And then he goes to Flanders' house and he's like, hey Flanders, let my friend stay at your house.
Yay.
Oakley doglies.
Right.
Meanwhile, Grandpa and Farnsworth talk to each other about insane old nonsense. Farnsworth talks about how he invented the smelloscope, and Grandpa's like, I invented the comma.
Not the question mark.
Professor Frink is there visiting his father and hears what Farnsworth is saying, and so he basically asks to sign Farnsworth out, and they're like, no. And so Frink unleashes a deadly robot to crash the wall, and then he just absconds with Professor Farnsworth.
Because he's like, this guy's really smart. I need to get him out of here.
Yeah. Well, he might be able to help me
with something.
Exactly.
Okay.
So
has he figured out he's in a comic and he needs?
No.
Oh, okay.
Meanwhile, Flanders goes downstairs because he hears a noise in the basement, and Bender's banging the jukebox. Flanders goes, "What are you doing in the jukebox?" He goes, "Don't turn on the lights." I love Bender fucking inanimate objects.
It's like these are the only robots they
They're not fucking
have.
inanimate objects, they're fucking robots.
That's true.
Yeah.
Anything with a circuit board.
Flanders faints.
He faints in his nightgown.
Does Bender have a dick? Like, I don't understand. Like, what's he doing?
No, it's like Robot Chicken, you know? He's just banging away.
He just bumps into it.
Yeah.
It's like the Fruit Fucker 2000.
Exactly. The Fruit Fucker has a dick. It's more like a...
No, it's got a shoot.
It's got to shoot. No one. As long as we're making references, then no one's going to understand. So meanwhile, at the country club, Zoidberg's making a mess because he's a horrible monster, and Hermes has to sit with Smithers at the non-millionaires table. And Hermes busts out like some of his patented spices, which are in a Mom's Friendly Robot Company shaker, which Smithers keys into, and he finds that like somehow familiar because, of course, Mom and Mr. Burns would obviously be a great match. But while that's happening, Mr. Burns starts choking on food, and so they're going to administer the Heimlich, but of course Zoidberg's a doctor, and a terrible one, so he puts Mr. Burns in a punch bowl and then drops a corded toaster oven into drops a corded toaster into it and like zaps Mr. Burns into spitting out the food that was in his throat, and he's like, "This is my personal physician from now on." And so that happens.
That's insane. Okay.
Well, Fry was like locked in the school overnight, so he couldn't solve any of these problems until the next day, when he then remembers that he had a copy of the comic book that they were reading, that they are technically in on
so he
him.
could show them.
So he shows Bart
They
the conversation.
went into that comic.
Yeah, and
but he was
I have
holding
it, with
it
me.
while he went into it.
Yeah.
Maybe he went into a different copy of the one because he had a whole bunch of them.
No,
right?
because what he turns the comic book to the page where they are having this conversation to prove to Bart that this is real.
That shouldn't work.
That's what?
And so Bart's like, well, why don't you just go further into the comic book to see where everybody is? And so he does. And so they leave. And don't forget that in the show, they've established that you can like chew anti-gravity bubble gum, which allows them to fly. So Fry thinks he sees Bender, but he actually sees the robot mascot of the comic book guy's comic book store. So he goes there. Comic book guy, of course, is like, what a big ripoff of Michael J. Fox's hoverboard from Back to the Future 2. Worst tribute ever. Mr. Burns eavesdrops on Zoidberg and Hermes and finds out that they're from the future, so he has them kidnapped or imprisoned so that he can extort, future information from them and then, become more of a billionaire.
Right. Little do you know, they don't have any practical knowledge of the future. That
I
would
mean,
help them in
Hermes
any
might be
way.
helpful, but even then, it'd be a future of an alternate reality because they're not from their future.
Yeah, it'd be useful. He'd have knowledge of like advanced, like futuristic accounting tactics.
Right.
or-
Yeah. Well, that'd be helpful. I think. So
He can organize the files there. He can limbo.
Yeah.
Limbo, that's true. So Leela and Lisa hang out at Lisa's place. Lisa shows Leela her saxophone, which of course Leela finds interesting because she's wooed by the holophoner from the show.
Well, what did Leela do the first night? Did she crash?
I guess she crashed at The Simpsons. We don't see that though.
Okay.
But
Yeah, she stayed in Lisa's closet.
right.
Right.
Well, who knows? But Leela finds kinship with Lisa because Lisa is like, ignored and an outcast.
Yeah.
She
but
doesn't-
also like really talented.
Yes, yeah. But she doesn't remember being an orphan, but she vaguely remembers that she was abandoned as a child, so she feels this kinship with Lisa. Lisa plays her saxophone for her, which wings her to tears. Nibbler didn't solve this problem because I think he was given milk, and that caused a brain fog because it's like lactose or something. And so finally, without having
feel you,
been
man.
given, yeah, it's true, but without being given any more milk, his brain fog fades, and he realizes that this is what we're in right now. I got to advance the plot. So he uses his powers to bring everybody up to speed that's in the room, and it's just literally goes, I must use my mental powers to fill everyone on the situation without lengthy exposition. One mass mind meld later, everyone just goes, oh, well, that's all clear to me now. And so Marge, Maggie, Lisa, and Leela are all on the same page.
Okay.
Bart and Fry jump through Lisa's window and arrive to try and give everybody the context, which they already know. So then Homer runs in, and he wants to tell everyone what's going on, and they tell him that they know, and Homer's like, oh, you know that Bender knocked up Flanders' jukebox? And then Bender comes in wearing a tuxedo. He goes, I intend to make an honest woman out of that jukebox.
That's pretty good.
A ring.
Yep.
Then
That's great. I want to know what that jukebox is going to give birth to and how.
I really hope that comes up.
It doesn't, but
Damn it!
No, it's funny without seeing the jukebox. For me, it's just like, no, it's not real. He didn't
Right,
really
he didn't
knock
actually knock it up. Like, Homer's just stupid.
But I love that Bender thinks it worked. So Nibbler gets a ping that like they need to go to the nuclear power plant because the story needs to end, and so Homer promises.
So needs to end. Look how much book is left. What's happening?
There's a sequel to it, and there's also like they also have the entire book in sketch form. Like you could see like the breakdowns and stuff, which is really cool, and also the covers and stuff.
Nice. Okay, so it's not actually that long.
No, there's 2 crossovers. There's one and there's another, and we're never gonna have another episode like this. So we're gonna do the second.
We're
one
gonna do
as
well.
Okay. So Homer and the gang get into the car, and they're in traffic. So they give gum to Homer. So Homer chews the gum and allows the car to fly, but they're too heavy. So then Fry encourages Bender to dump the things he stole from Flanders Place. And so he does, which also includes Fry's holophoner, which he just took. So Fry takes the holophoner with him. And Homer then realizes that his gum has lost flavor, so he spits it out. So the car plummets, and it lands on the Duff blimp. And then so it lands on the Duff blimp, and they're there. And then Bender is like, "This calls for a celebratory smoke," and so he lights a cigar, and then he blows the blimp up.
The Duff blimp is a Zeppelin apparently with hydrogen. It's insane.
That's right.
Well, all blimps explode.
That's true.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I know about blimps.
Because of that one, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So they continue to plummet until they are caught by a hover bike with a magnet attached to it that is driven by Frink and Farnsworth.
Thank God they addressed the fact that the pilot of the blimp parachuted to safety.
Yeah,
I was like,
they didn't kill
why just
someone.
let the blimp people die?
Yeah, this isn't a Frank Grimes episode. We don't want to have needless deaths.
So Frink somehow knew that the thing they were going to need was a flying motorcycle with a giant magnet on it.
He just always has that.
I mean, there are cartoon characters after all. So then Lisa sees the holophoner, and Fry explains what that concept is, and he's bad at it. And of course, Lisa is naturally gifted, so she'll be able to play it later. So anyway, everyone, including Scruffy, break into the nuclear power plant where Mr. Burns has realized that like Hermes is the only one with intelligence, and Zoidberg is useless, so he's going to dump Zoidberg into a radioactive waste tank.
What?
Unless they all surrender and give them their knowledge of the future. And so then, Farnsworth has also whipped up a doohickey that'll allow them to extricate themselves from the comic book into the real world again.
So this is just like, we need a villain. I guess
Mr. Burns.
He's the villain of The Simpsons. Yeah, okay.
Yep. And so they try to explain to Mr. Burns that they're fictitious characters, and so Bart pulls out the comic book they're in, and Homer and Marge look at it, and he's like, "I'm having zany adventures." So then Mr. Burns is like, "Well, then give me the device so I can leave this place and be real, and take the future or whatever. I'm the villain of the book."
Right.
So then Smithers cartwheels in, grabs the machine from him, and reveals that he's actually Amy.
Oh.
That Amy essentially was also dumped in here, but didn't have a counterpart, so she just read the paper and realized, because she's already seen every episode of The Simpsons, that Mr. Burns is typically the villain of every episode that requires a villain. So she just follows Mr. Burns around, and then took out Smithers and impersonated Smithers because she's also great at that, and waited for him to make his move. And then Mr. Burns does a cartwheel and takes the device away from her, revealing that actually he is Smithers. And then Homer rightfully asks where Mr. Burns is, and Mr. Burns just turns around in a chair in the room, and he's like, "Nah, it's me." And they're like, "How do we not notice that big chair?" And so Mr. Burns is going to turn on the device and be sent into the future when Kodos and Kang and more aliens of his race enter the room.
This makes sense.
Yeah, well, because they're Futurama, right?
They're aliens.
Yeah, so they come in and they're like, "Hey, everybody." And so Smithers grabs Burns and runs away, and they are revealed to be holophoner holograms depicted by Lisa.
Now, are Kodos and Kang...
Right, are they aliens?
They're not in the
They are
real
not
Simpsons
in the real
universe, right?
No, they are. Yeah, no,
they are?
They were only
Well,
in the
they're
Treehouse of Horror.
they are only in the Treehouse of Horror episodes, but I think
At least up through season 9.
that's true. Yeah, but I definitely want to say that Kodos and Kang are canon to The Simpsons and their universe. It's
Right,
just
like
that
they are aliens
don't-
that do exist. They just haven't shown up as
as in the
aliens
show
in the main story of the show.
outside of the context of Treehouse of Horror.
Right.
That we've seen.
Yeah, there
As far as
are
we know,
there are
maybe
20 more seasons.
They're probably regular recurring characters now.
for all I know. So then Homer promises to let Zoidberg down, but just drops him into the vat anyway. And when Zoidberg emerges, he is a hot, hunky, regular human being.
What?
That's
Sure.
And so then
he's like, I'm hideous, put me back.
He's more like, he's like, the women are all drooling in disgust at me, and because they're all so attracted to him.
Right.
Farnsworth activates the device, which causes a tear in reality, which also tears the comic book you're reading, which then rips the book in real life, and the brains are like, hey, I thought that this comic was mint, but there's a tear in the cover, which also enrages the planet itself because it was a misgraded comic. So then the planet itself attacks and destroys the brain spawn, which also shatters the diamond around the comic book, allowing everyone to leave, but not before giving enough time for each franchise character to say goodbye to each other, and then they all get dumped out of there. Then Leela says, Professor, do you think that there will be any side effects to our weakening the barrier between these comic books and our reality? And Farnsworth says, what a forced and odd question. So then they all leave, and when they get home, the Simpsons have now leaked into the Futurama reality.
Oh, so that we're going to deal with in the next one?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, which was also just kind of like a tease. Like, this is just kind of like a fun Treehouse of Horror-esque ending. But,
but let's actually do it.
But let's actually do that, though, even though it was like hard to accomplish. And and we also
back at the same comic.
Yeah, the comic book that they were reading actually did exist, and they did do it afterwards, and so here it is. And I'm not going to bother with it because like this collection does have that and more.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I thought it started off back in the same.
It does start back in the same issue that it started with, but actually continues the thread as though the Futurama characters never showed up in the first place.
See, I was thinking that the next issue,
it's confusing,
like the sequel to this, was going to be, all right, we're in the beginning of the Simpsons episode or issue.
Yeah.
And that continues, and then we pull them out.
Right. No. Instead, everyone from Springfield is doppeled into the Futurama reality.
Just randomly.
Well, because of the tear in reality, yeah.
But like, where do they? How does whatever rule that causes them to enter our reality determine that they all go to the same planet?
Right.
On the same city.
Especially since it took place on a different planet.
Right.
Because we want it. Like because it's a crossover, don't they?
Because they have to show up there because that's Earth. And the Simpsons are
from
Earth.
It's because it's the Futurama version of the planet that they came from in their reality.
There you go. That's as good an explanation as any. So Morbo and Kent Brockman are both reporting live from the carnage to explain to their respective characters.
But who is Kent Brockman talking to? Because he didn't bring his whole crew with him. Well, I guess he did bring his whole crew with him.
They're talking to us.
Right.
They're explaining to us what's happening. But I love it because he says, like, this must be a mass hallucination we're all suffering from, which I haven't seen the likes of since Chief Wiggum ate his own peyote, insanity, pepper chili, and went on a shooting rampage. And Fry's like, hey, I have that comic. Which essentially which is called Chili Chili Bang Bang.
Oh, man.
So
that's funny.
So Fry and Bender are watching the invasion of the Simpsons on their reality on TV, and Leela's like, "Why are you watching it on TV when it's happening outside our window?" And Bender, of course, says the window is in high definition. So then Professor Frink smashes through the window and explains, their realities are coalescing and it's a problem. And then the police show up and they go to try and arrest Professor Frink, which they do because Professor Frink isn't real, and he needs to be locked up because
these are the reality police.
Yeah, well, they're going to explain it later because then Professor Farnsworth essentially explains it.
That's kind of good.
You'll see, like Professor Farnsworth shows up and he's like, "Good news, everyone," and Hermes like, "Good news, everyone" is a registered catchphrase of Planet Express. The management guarantees no actual good news.
I like that this is following the format of like
this is a Futurama.
We do a Simpsons episode and then we do a Futurama episode. Yeah, it's like fair,
and it feels like a Futurama episode, whereas the other one felt more like a Simpsons episode.
Right.
So Farnsworth is like, everyone make sure to take your flashback pills because the pills will allow them to flash back to the context that we need to explain why the police are arresting Simpsons characters and where Professor Farnsworth was in that interim.
Okay.
But Bender didn't want to take it, and so he makes Fry take it. So Fry has two flashbacks that are the same flashbacks, so we get both flashbacks of the same flashback. But anyway, so there was a science symposium between Farnsworth and Wernstrom. Wernstrom is Farnsworth's mortal enemy and fellow scientist. Farnsworth, I think he had a self-eating watermelon that was his invention, but he drops it. And so when he was supposed to... It means that the watermelon had teeth. But So he was like, so like, you don't have an invention? And he's like, oh, no, I definitely do. And he like had the Simpsons issue from the previous crossover stuck to the bottom of his foot. So he takes it out and explains that like the barrier to those realities were weakened and how we could actually harness the power of a fictional world for our reality. And they're like, but how and why? And so Farnsworth explains that he has like reality cutting shears that he can use, and he cuts the comic book with his shears, which actually causes like too big a tear, which dumps all of the Simpsons from all of Springfield into the Symposium Center, which also retcons the big reveal on the 2-page splash in the previous story. Like that just seemed like, oh, some part of the Simpsons imprinted onto us and appeared, but this is no. Farnsworth, like everything wrapped up fine, but Farnsworth then cut the comic book in haste to show any semblance of competency, and ended up dumping all the Simpsons.
Project.
Yes, and so he dumps all the Simpsons and everyone from Springfield into the hall, which is on Earth. So that's why they're actually on Earth.
Oh, I see. Yes, because he does it in one room, so they all show up in that room.
Exactly. So then everyone just kind of disperses, and they're like, yes, but why would we want this?
Yeah, you've successfully demonstrated that you can do it.
Right,
now
but
explain
why?
For what purpose.
So Farnsworth
was
explains,
this his plan, or
science
No.
doesn't need the why. I'm just proving that I can do it.
Yeah, exactly. So Farnsworth explains that, well, since they're not real people, they have no guaranteed or inalienable rights, so we can use them as like slave labor, I guess.
Well, that's terrible.
So that becomes his plan. That wasn't necessarily what he didn't know was going to happen, basically.
No, he thought he was going to like have 1 or 2 characters pop out or something. But
Right.
instead he made too big a tear. So now like if you're not real, you are a enemy of the state and you're going to be arrested and put into slave labor.
Right. Does the state have like a slave labor system that they
No.
can plug these people into? Or they have
Yeah,
to
they're
build
robots.
one.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
No, they
Just
don't.
treat them like robots.
They just go like, well, we know. I mean, humanity has a pretty good built-in system for slavery.
Yeah, I think
anyway.
we'll figure it
We
out.
can figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have like thousands of years of evolution have taught us how to enslave our own kind, so we can do that easily. So the Simpsons go to Planet Express because they heard them talk about how they worked for Planet Express in the previous crossover.
Okay. Do the characters remember the Futurama people?
Yes, they do.
Okay.
Yes, which is established by Lisa hugging Leela and being like, "You haven't forgotten us, have you? We haven't forgotten you." And so they ended up going here, and so the police come back in, and the Futurama characters say that the Simpsons that are there are actually action figures, but life-sized, and so they're like, "Nah, that's weird."
We've already made action figures of these people from another dimension.
Yeah.
Well, I guess they are from a comic book.
well, no, they
so
know
yeah,
who they
yeah,
are because
yeah.
like in this. In
Yeah,
the
everybody knows who these people are because
Yeah.
they're like, you're those comic book characters that we all read.
Or those TV show characters. Like I remember when they go to the garbage ball in Futurama, there's an entire like pile of Bart Simpson dolls.
Right.
So
It's interesting. I'm wondering if when he cut the shears, or
yeah, when he shears cut the comic book
this is the comic book
that they're from. It is the comic book they went into, so this would stand to
Right.
reason that these are the Simpsons that would remember having crossed over with the Futurama characters.
Right.
But if that's the case, wouldn't there also be Futurama characters coming out of this?
No, because they've
And they're
already
doubled
left
up?
out. They only went into it thanks to the power of the brain spawn. Once they were taken out of it, as we established in the actual comic book that we read, that takes place between the first crossover and this crossover, there is a comic book that does not include the Futurama characters, that is the adventure that the Futurama characters were reading.
And that
So they
means that
disappeared
the
from it?
characters,
Yeah. Well, remember, because there is a comic book that the Simpsons were in that
Yes.
the Futurama characters were reading.
Yes.
Yes.
So that means
But then
that
it became a real comic book with the Futurama characters in it
No,
as part of it
it was
because they
an
saw
adventure
themselves
that the
in
Futurama
it while
characters
they were
in.
reading it.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
But once they were extricated from it,
Then they
it
disappeared
reverted
from it?
back- yes, it reverted back to the comic book that it had
Okay,
originally
but
been.
they still remember
that's the
having been
trouble.
in it.
having been in it.
in that, yes, they remember being in it.
But shouldn't the Simpsons not
The Simpsons
remember?
characters should not be remembering
Well,
the Futurama characters
right, yeah.
because
they're
they-
from the comic where it reverted back to itself.
That's true.
Yes. Yeah.
Ha!
But they
maybe
do,
they
so
do.
shut up.
Maybe it's like, no, that all happened. It's just not captured in a book.
Yeah.
It
That happened
happens
to us, and
in
then
between
time
the pages
reverted.
that you were reading, but I still remember as
Right.
a character that reality existed.
I mean, they don't explain that.
yeah.
That much is certain.
Never addressed.
Never
Never
explained.
explained.
So, essentially, what they end up doing is they end up basically making the Simpsons their slaves, but they're going to be more like employees of Planet Express.
Right.
You know, like, we're going to treat you well,
We'll hide you.
but we'll hide you by like saying that you're slaves of us. And so, like, let's go do a delivery.
So the government doesn't care to control the slaves. It just wants to make sure that they are enslaved.
Yes. That's true.
messed up.
I know. Well, and that's like a dystopian future that I understand Futurama to be.
Yeah.
You know, like they take like Fat Tony and his gang and make them slaves of the mobster robot and clamps and whatnot.
So that they can interact.
So we can see them interact. Like Isaac, the bartender robot, has to be paired up with Mo because they're both bartenders. You see.
Yeah, I just want to go back a second to there being Bart Simpson dolls in Futurama.
Yeah.
For some reason, in my brain, that was always like, no, like they're the future of our reality, and so Bart Simpson dolls are they're still making the Bart Simpson dolls that they made.
Yeah.
But I never thought that like they're watching The Simpsons.
Right.
Like The Simpsons is a cartoon for them, like currently.
Yeah.
Which is almost like they've been making The Simpsons for like 1,000 years or something.
No, because in the garbage episode, the garbage ball was made like centuries before Futurama takes place.
Oh yeah, it was gonna come back and
that's
hit her.
right.
Yes,
That's right.
Yes, no, that's a garbage ball full of trash from Fry's time.
From our time. Okay. Yep.
So
That's right.
Yeah, no, it's not that the Simpsons won't die. It's that the
Even though it
Simpsons.
won't.
Except there is a comic book of The Simpsons, so actually it didn't
Well, yeah,
die.
no, but Fry is reading old
he's
books.
reading old books.
Yeah.
Where did he get them?
Oh, well, he probably just collected them or found them.
Okay,
I mean,
so
like-
But
Only
everyone in
he
the
remembers
future
The
knows
Simpsons.
these characters.
Maybe they don't.
well, they don't seem to go like, oh, it's my favorite characters, Groundskeeper Willie and
Right.
Mo.
They're more like, oh, it's those characters from 1,000 years ago
Yes.
from that show.
And they don't know to team up with them or why that would be entertaining.
right.
Only Fry would understand the context. But even
Yeah.
then, he wouldn't because he doesn't know they're Futurama characters. He just knows they're his friends and family. So Hermes tells everyone, like, stop talking and go make a delivery. As Planet Express's business minder, I think we should mind our own business. Get into the ship and go deliver this thing to the ice planet in the Galucas galaxy. The Simpsons go with them, and they have fun. It's really funny. Lisa's impressed with Leela because Leela's like a spaceship captain and everybody has to listen to her, but of course like no one does because everyone's an idiot. And we see that like Bart and Fry are in a thumb war, and then Bender's like, ooh, let me play. And then we just jump cut to Fry's on the ground and Bender hit him with a chair. And Bart says, you hit him with a chair. And Bender's already smoking, going, all's fair in war, kid. So
Yep.
anyway, they're flying around the galaxy while everyone's getting their asses kicked. Meanwhile, Mr. Burns is assigned to Mom.
Yep.
So, of course, like, Mr. Burns immediately charms Mom and starts slapping around the triplets of moms, and Mom is immediately enthralled with Mr. Burns. And so the two of them are going to be our antagonists for the rest of the story.
Once again, yep. Okay.
I actually really like this pairing. I love Mom being wooed by Mr. Burns. I like Mr. Burns being set against Mom and not being impressed or intimidated.
Yeah.
Like that's a combo I just watch on its own.
Yeah.
But anyway.
I ship these two
Exactly.
regularly.
There's a great joke in this where, of course, we see Mo and Isaac. Like, why would we even bother? Because, of course, there's a phone call, and Mo picks up, and he says, yeah, I'm looking for robot 100100.
Everyone laughs.
Everybody laughs. And Calcula goes, well, she's your mother. That still doesn't seem appropriate. And it's revealed that, like, Bart and Bender prank called him.
Oh my God, that's great. It's interesting that they paired up like Bender with Homer in the first episode because I would have thought Bender with Bart.
Yeah.
But it makes sense because he's a drunk.
Right.
But it also makes sense because he's like a mischievous like scamp.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they're watching TV. They paired up old Gil, the salesman, with malfunctioning Eddie, the like exploding robot salesman.
Yeah. Sure.
It is
Yep. That's
another
great.
fantastic joke where like Gil's trying to sell like the Jetsons car and like the TARDIS and the Crushinator from the old episode of Futurama, and he says, "Oh, Gil's been driving this baby all week long," and of course the Crushinator's father shows up and he's like, "Hey, this fella's been test driving you, Crushinator." Crushinator's like, "I love him."
I love him, Father.
Yes.
So, like, Gil ends up having to marry the Crushinator. And, like the freaking, the priest bot is like, I now pronounce you man and vehicle. So anyway, the the crew goes to the ice planet of Hoth, obviously, and they make a delivery to a Wampa, and the delivery is actually like a cookbook, like making a Twilight Zone reference or whatever, cooking delivery people the low-carb way. So, everyone's suspended upside down, and so now we're in peril, haha. Bart ends up getting a stick and throwing it, and the Wampa, falls off the cliff edge. And so we see them do a couple of other, parody deliveries, they go to, They go into Aliens,
right? So
where they're dealing with xenomorphs, and Marge has to fight the alien queen using a power loader. They go to the 2001 Space Odyssey house, or the gated community for the Star Baby.
Okay.
Okay, that's a reference we're gonna make. And so most of the the rest of Springfield, where we didn't have one panel gags for, all get roped up into the dupe army. So they all have to work for Zapp Brannigan because Zapp Brannigan. What about?
Right, I was just thinking, how are they gonna?
How are we gonna work in Zapp Brannigan? Well, Zapp Brannigan's
it's ridiculous.
Yeah, so Milhouse and Ralph and stuff. So Zapp gets his velour suit torn because he's too fat for it, and Smithers reveals that he's a good seamstress, so he knows how to fix it. So he gets he outranks Kiff as a result of becoming the official seamstress for the captain.
He replaces Kiff.
Yep.
Okay. I thought he was gonna give Kiff some pointers on being a good lackey or something.
Yeah, right. No, he
He
immediately leaves.
just replaces him.
Yeah.
Okay.
It goes right off the rails. You'd think Kiff and Smithers, that makes sense, but
Right.
no. God, there's a great gag where Homer tries to use a food replicator, but it's just him printing pictures of food. He's your future 3D printed food is terrible. You're just printing pictures of food on a printer. And then Zoidberg's you're gonna finish that?
Yeah.
So Bart's dicking around with the shears, the reality tearing shears,
yes.
and ends up breaking it so it won't stop cutting. And Bender's like, "Oh, I know how to fix that." And he just throws it out the window. It lands in the New York Public Library.
That's not our problem.
Where it cuts the fabric of reality in all the books, and now we gotta have literary characters all
Yay.
spill into Futurama.
Oh my gosh.
So Paul Bunyan and Sherlock Holmes and whatnot. You'll see more of them. Obviously, they're we didn't do this or a one-off gag. We're
Right.
gonna keep this. This is now a pressing issue.
This is the book. Yeah.
So because of the shears, it's basically it turned into a wormhole that allows the characters to just continually pour out of it from one central location. This centralized portal thing. Okay. We don't have to worry about the shears anymore. The shears are essentially turned into a portal.
It very much reminds me of Last Action Hero now.
Oh yeah, big time. So because of this new problem, it's caused a massive outcry against fictional characters, and so they're all starting to become rounded up, and so we established that Dracula's taken over as mayor of New York. It's become a mess.
New York,
thank you. And 1950s flying saucer aliens have popped out, and so now they're assaulting Planet Express ship, and so they're trying to fly away from them. And this is a great moment where they don't have enough power to get away from them, and so Homer suggests that they put racing stripes on the side, and Fry's I like it.
Oh my god.
And so they, so Farnsworth is well, it's the best plan we've got. Make it so. And so they go out on the side, and they forgot which one they were doing. So Bender's lightning bolts. I thought we were doing flames. And then Homer goes, why not both? And Fry goes, yeah, then the ship will go twice as fast. So then Bender's this makes me thirsty. How about a beer? And Homer's yeah, let me get this helmet off first.
Oh my god.
So he throws it, and the beer causes a chain reaction that blows up all the ships, and then everybody goes back on, and then the Nimbus, the Zapp Brannigan ship, calls, to take over Planet Express ship, and we have this little sight gag where Zapp Brannigan's Leela, what a sexy surprise. And then it's revealed that Zapp Brannigan was mutinied against, and he's actually in a cage. And Smithers has taken over the Nimbus, and he's a space pirate because he's always wanted to be one.
What? Smithers is the bad guy?
Smithers is the bad guy. He's always wanted to be a space pirate, and so he wormed his way into Zapp Brannigan's good graces and then takes over the ship.
Okay, I'm fine with this.
Right? I'm
Weird choice.
Very much reminds me of
Flash Gordon.
Flash Gordon.
Yeah, big time.
Smithers as the bad guy seems like very old school.
Well, it's classic Simpsons arcade stuff.
Yeah, I was gonna say like season 2 or
Season
something.
1. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's the video game.
Yeah. Okay.
Anyway, all of you are going to be slaves working for me, and we're going to traipse you across the galaxy and loot and plunder. And Marge is like, "What about Mr. Burns?" And he goes, "I'm sure Mr. Burns is fine." And Leela's like, "Actually, he's dating Mom, and as I understand it, they're quite an item." So of course, Mr. Smithers immediately abandons all plans and goes back to Earth. We can see that like Hermes and the kids are being chased by Stephen King inventions.
Sweet. Oh yeah. A whole street of them.
It's
Okay.
a great sequence. It's just so stupid. It's just straight up dumb, and it's exactly the kind of joke I'd expect from Futurama, and I love it. Where the Tin Man is attacking the police, and he says, "I want to axe you something," and Tweedledee and Tweedledum go, "Time for Malice in Wonderland," and then Dorothy goes, "Follow the yellow brick road to an ass kicking."
Yep.
Yay.
Burns and Mom are just like canoodling on the balcony watching this chaos, tear the city apart. And the children, Mom's kids, are being taken away by Mr. Bumble from Oliver Twist. And like, just so that Burns can go, "The Dickens, you say."
Why are they not being taken away by literary characters?
Because Mom's too powerful.
Right, I
She's
suppose.
her place
she's
is
gonna go
fortified.
Yeah.
I assumed that the pirate ship was going to be to free all of the
Sure.
Simpsons characters.
Yeah,
You're like,
no.
no, we're space pirates. We're gonna get all of the people that are enslaved and bring them with us.
Yeah, no.
Nope.
No.
Nope. So, Smithers is gonna prepare the Nimbus for an emergency landing, but they can't, and he flips the wrong switch, and so everyone just gets dumped out of the ship, and they all just plummet to their dooms. Meanwhile, one of these like salesman robots is just flies up to everyone. It's like, "Anybody want a parachute rental?" Fort Smith goes, "What do I look like, a tourist? Get lost!" So everyone grabs the parachute. They, descend, and then, Ahab takes Zoidberg because he's a fish, and so. So everyone's like, it's pandemonium. Now the Futurama and the Simpsons are dealing with all these different characters. A lot of fun jokes and sight gags. Like
Now it's barely a crossover
it's nothing.
of The Simpsons.
Yeah,
Now it's just
a Futurama episode.
yeah, it's just a Futurama episode.
And we can make a couple of references to The Simpsons, like
Right.
just a couple of romance novel male leads all like surround Marge, and she's like, "Uh-oh." Lisa gets attacked by a bunch of like children's lit characters like Pippi Longstocking and whatnot, and then Bart bumps into all the most popular Marvel and DC characters because there must have been some graphic novels
Right.
in the library, which of course Superman's like, "Why not just call them comic books, for God's sake?" And of course they're all cast in shadow, which Bart immediately identifies, and they say that the reason for that is copyright protection.
Right.
And so they're all gonna attack the Simpsons when Bart points out that, like, he basically tells the Marvel characters that the DC characters told them that, like, everyone from your company is a sissy.
Right.
And so they all fight each other because, of course, Fry identifies that, like, it's easy to get any comic book characters to fight each other.
Yep.
It's happening right now.
Yes. So they do. So then they're like, "We're not going to get through this pandemonium. Like, what are we going to do to get back to Planet Express?" And so Bart jumps on Fry's shoulders and then gets everyone's attention and says that they're fictional characters too. And so they betray the Futurama team and they get taken away by the fictitious characters. Because of course, like, the fictional characters are getting retribution for being treated like second-class citizens. But the Simpsons are like, "Oh, that's great! Like, we knew we weren't going to get through them, so you gave them up, but only so that we could then go rescue them later." And Bart's like, "Yeah, sure." So they go to the Planet Express and this is an excuse just to have the Simpsons run around through Planet Express and make references, which are gold. Like, they're looking for something to help, and Homer finds a MC Escher sketch. He says, "I found an MC Escher sketch, but all I can draw are things that hurt my brain."
Yep.
Bart plays the thing longer. They find the what if machine. And, Homer's just dicking around, and Marge goes, "What if you actually tried to help this family for a change?" And then it sees everyone is going to be killed, and everything's on fire. And they're like, "Oh, why didn't we let Homer help us?" And so they're like, "Oh, we could ask the machine what to do." And then Homer goes, "What if Flanders was a monkey?" So then the third time, they ask it, like, "What if we knew how to defeat the fictional characters?"
Yeah, because you only get 3 asks.
That's what they said. They say later. They're like, what are we going to do about this? Like, we can ask the what if machine. Like, you can only ask it 3 questions per year.
Just burned all of them.
Yeah. So they go to Fry's place, and so Bart has the idea. So they go to Fry's apartment. They find his comic book collection, where they pull out the first issue of the Simpsons comics, which has king-sized Homer in it.
It's in here.
So he rips out the page where king-sized Homer appears, because Homer in this issue is irradiated and grows.
Right.
not-
So they want him to help fight or something.
Yeah. Big Homer will.
How come he's the only?
That's the Fantastic Four ripoff, right?
Yeah. The cover is a total homage to the original Fantastic Four first issue.
Right.
Yeah. So giant Homer emerges from the comic book, and then he just starts running amok and destroying the city, and all the fictitious characters are trying to like stop him for some reason, and he just squishes some of them with his feet. There's a great moment where, like, now that king-size Homer is unleashed on the city, all we can do is pray. And then the Space Pope shows up and goes, there's a $5 tax on praying. And Homer goes, lousy future. So king-size Homer attacks all the fictitious characters, and so that causes them to all retreat back into the vortex.
They just decide they don't want to be here anymore.
Yep. So they leave and they go
Well,
in
we
there.
can't possibly fight that.
Yep. And so they go in there.
Okay.
And so they do, and now the Futurama team is teamed back up with the Simpsons, and now they're left with king-sized Homer to contend with. The original mayor of New York is like, please deal with this, or we're gonna charge you for every building he destroys. And so that's when they ask. They're gonna ask the what if machine, and then they go, oh, maybe we'll use a doomsday weapon, and Farnsworth's like, oh, I was saving this atomic bomb for the 4th of July. So then they're like, well, wait, what are the things that that a giant Homer loves more than anything? And they go, Mom, TV. And Homer's like, pork chops. So then they put on the Futurama TV from the
big one that
opening.
breaks.
They broadcast Marge holding pork chops. And she's like, giant-sized Homer, I'm over here. And so he goes to the screen, and he starts like hugging it and like trying to eat the pork chops through it.
Is giant-sized Homer like simple?
Yeah, he's like stupid or something.
Okay.
Like, maybe because he's so big.
Did you read the giant-sized Homer?
I
Is that-
did.
Is he supposed to be like King Kong?
Yeah, he's like King Kong.
Right,
Like,
he
he gets dumb as he gets big.
He gets dumb as he the dumber, the bigger he gets, the dumber he gets.
Exactly. So then they hire Sal. Yeah, there's the surly guy who does like manual labor in Futurama. His name's Sal. And anyway, he delivers the vortex from the library to under Homer. And so then he gets sucked into the vortex and back into the comic book. And then he's going to like transport the vortex away from here, but not before a tearful goodbye, where the Simpsons have to jump back into the vortex and go back to where they came from.
Right.
There's a great moment where like Bart just goes like, hey, sorry about my dad destroying the city. And Batter's just smoking a cigar looking at it. He goes, well, Bondo buff that right out. Like the whole city's just in ruins.
Aren't the Shears still going? Aren't they
The
still
Shears
a problem?
became the
Yeah,
vortex.
they disappeared into the vortex. So
Yeah.
they morphed into the vortex
Yeah,
or something.
yeah, exactly.
They just cut open so many books.
Then it just became a transportable vortex that you could pick up and transport. So, Bart's
Little
obviously like, we learned a valuable lesson here today, which means that like books are bad and TV saved the day, so don't read. They all agree to go on one last delivery, and so they do. And Homer asks to drive, and they say, I don't see the harm in that, and he smashes into the moon, knocks a big chunk off. So then, the kids, the triplets drop back off with Mom, and they talk about how much they miss Dad. And they're like, you idiot, he's not your father. He's just some guy that Mom was banging. And they're like, Mom.
And he went back into the
he
portal?
went back into the portal. They must have like rounded him up. Remember, everyone else was like pretty much a prisoner at that point. So
Okay.
I thought that was all the other people.
yeah, that's true. Mr. Burns should not have been sucked in, but he was.
Yeah.
And all that Mom has is a lock of hair to remember him by. Of course, Mom then uses that lock of hair to clone him.
Oh.
And so she makes the Mr. Burns clone, and the machine says, your clone is ready, please allow 1 year to cool. And she's like, yes, and then, once we're reunited, Monty, then we'll truly teach this city a lesson. It'll be brutal, it'll be vicious, it'll be excellent. And she does the excellent, and I'm like, yeah! I love Mom doing the excellent thing. there was no other crossover.
Right, it's
it
like,
did not take
did
a
they
year.
pay that off?
They did not pay it off. It never gets paid off.
What would they have done if they had?
I think it would have just been a Futurama book where it's
Right.
like if
But there is no
Mr.
Futurama book.
No, there was.
Oh, there was.
There had been. So
Oh,
it's like,
okay.
yeah, they. By the way, Chili Chili Bang Bang, that reference they made, there is a comic book and it's in this collection.
Yay.
So you have like the complete collections. You get every reference they're making, including King Size Homer, which you could just have a copy of. It's like, okay. So yeah, that's it. It's just like a cute, very steeped in comics kind of crossover. And it does what Futurama tends to do, which is bend over backwards to explain how they're doing a premise that is really pretty simple and would be pretty plainly accepted by the audience face value.
Right. Like, no, we're going to get into it.
Yeah, let me really get into it. It's like, you really don't have to.
Yeah, but I'm going to make a few jokes along the way, so.
Oh, okay. Well, then I guess I'm on board. and I mean, like, it's predicated on, like, Farnsworth inventing an impossible invention. Like, it's
Right.
like, the premise is already faulty, but whatever.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's just, there you go. Futurama and The Simpsons crossing over. And that was originally when we were going to do this book, like, 8 or 9 years ago. It would have been, this is the only time you're ever going to see The Simpsons and Futurama crossover. Of course, they did, in arguably a more disappointing crossover. I did see the crossover,
Oh, yeah?
and I wasn't a fan, you know, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
It was a little satisfying.
Well, you
but at
weren't
that
a
point-
fan of either franchise at that point.
At that point, both franchises had already passed their expiration dates, so for me, I was like, oh, well, that's a little too late.
Yeah.
And none of the jokes in that were as good as any of them in this. Like, the gags in here are authentic.
They're fantastic.
They're so good, and they're so relevant to each other's franchise, and yet bridging them makes it work all the more.
It's super weird, super random.
Yep.
I don't know who this was for. I
I mean,
guess
I think it's for Simpsons
For you,
fans.
yeah, like-
Simpsons fans and Futurama fans. It's
Yeah.
like this is the time, and I can imagine Matt Groening being like, I would never do a show like that. Would be terrible, but I will greenlight the comic book.
right.
You know, and for a long time that was it. I mean, but then I think what really killed it was the Simpsons Family Guy crossover.
Oh yeah.
That
Once
was when they
did
went,
that-
oh, well then just do anything.
Yeah.
Like, why don't we buy the rights to the Flintstones and do a Simpsons Flintstones crossover
Right.
at that point? I mean, why bother?
Family Guy did a Star Wars.
Well, they did,
crossover.
like-
there's been so many things now.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, I guess anyone can just do anything.
Yeah, yeah. And I'll admit, like, I've seen the Simpsons Family Guy crossover, and it's all right. Like, it's fair.
Okay.
I would say it borders on mid.
On the high end of mid or the low end of
I'd
mid?
say high end.
Oh, okay.
Because I am a sucker for a crossover. You know, like,
Right.
I
You do
hated-
intrinsically like crossovers.
I loathed the Flintstones and the Jetsons. And I
yeah.
have seen the Jetsons meet the Flintstones
and you're like,
twice.
not bad.
I was like, all right. Because it distills it. It's like, I wouldn't
Yeah,
watch the
yeah.
Jetsons week to week.
No, that'd be crazy.
That would be horrible. Yeah. That presupposes that there is literally no other entertainment in the world as an alternative.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I could cut my nails or fish rather than watch an episode of the Jetsons.
Right. Well, would you rather watch the Jetsons or Rocky and Bullwinkle?
Wow. I mean, so here's the thing.
Or Snagglepuss.
I will say Snagglepuss is on the lowest end of it. I'll say Rocky and Bullwinkle because there's always the chance that we could get a Peabody and Sherman.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
You know, but if you're telling me no, Sans, it's going to be
one of the ones without Peabody and Sherman.
if it's going to be if a regular episode of Rocky and Bullwinkle will be interrupted, it will be by Dudley Do Right. Then I will watch the Jetsons.
Fair.
Right? I mean, like,
I'm with you all the way.
come
on.
on. I mean, Rocky and Bullwinkle is like it's like Sports Night, where it's like a show
What?
that Sports Night was a show that was marketed as a comedy with no jokes in it. Like this is just a lie.
Right.
But I have seen that crossover, and it's because it's like it takes. I know the premise of both those properties, and I've seen way too many of the Flintstones and Jetsons to count. But when you make it a crossover, you take the biggest and most obvious elements of each of their universes,
right.
and then you subvert them.
Right.
Right? Like, oh,
Yeah.
I
And
see-
they subvert each other.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they highlight the tropes and everything that the other's dependent upon.
Exactly.
Which is funny.
Which is funny.
Yeah.
Are you freaking kidding me?
Alex Ross did a Radioactive Man and Fall Out Boy cover.
Yeah, that's great.
Can you believe it?
That's insane.
I know. That says to me that there's a Simpsons fan in everyone, right? Like Alex Ross is not doing it for the money. I mean, he definitely did.
Did he actually do that, or is that just in his style?
That's him.
Wow.
That's Alex Ross.
I was going to say no. That means The Simpsons has too much money.
I mean, not enough to keep Bongo Comics going.
Well, no.
The
great. Fantastic crossovers and the sketches
Yes.
are awesome. I love all the different ideas that they have. I love the concepts that they did. I love all the different characters and the different iterations, like the Barry Windsor Smith version or the Arnold hair.
Yeah. Like 2 different versions of Conan. Like, how are we going to portray them?
There's different versions of like Pirate Smithers.
Yeah. I love this. Watch Risque Element. Like, watch it.
Are these just fun drawings that they did while they were making this, or were these actual ideas that just didn't make it?
Some of these ideas did make it. This guy, the Keep on Truckin' Mutant did end up in there. The Tin Man did. Like, all these characters did end up
with
pretty
like
much
specific
in it.
plot elements, like Pirate Smithers protecting Mr. Burns.
Yeah, no, I think
there.
that's just having fun.
The art is fantastic.
Yeah, the other thing is, like, this is a tough premise. Doing a beloved and like chronicled show, or 2 for that matter, and then trying to capture both of them in their distinct style, panel to panel, outside of your normal distribution method. Like, you're used to watching these guys in motion, you're used to watching them on TV, you're used to the voices, it's a lot of hurdles to jump, and that's just the premise of making comic books of these characters, and then to merge them, or to cross them over, like come on.
Yeah.
It's a Herculean effort.
Fortunately, the art styles were already similar.
Yes.
Right. Obviously, Futurama is in a similar art style to The Simpsons, but it works seamlessly. I mean, it's kind of incredible.
It is.
And it's perfectly executed. I mean,
no.
it's like I mean, maybe they did like get the artists who like actually worked on like these characters for the shows. I mean, because there's no difference. In the designs.
No, it's
with
actually
what's in the show.
I find that this is actually more beholden to like the house style of both their respective properties than the show would be. Like, The Simpsons drastically alters your like headcanon design of Homer as it progresses, whereas this is Arrested Development for Homer. It's just it's what Homer looked like during the best years. Futurama, that's pretty much stayed in the same style the whole time. But so there it is. The episode you didn't see. Thanks for not watching, but hopefully, if nothing else, it'll cause you to seek out these crossovers because they're fun, and maybe to go back and look for some old Bongo comics. Like, I had a couple. I remember my first Simpsons Bongo comic was actually a Halloween trick-or-treat gift. I was at a house, and they threw it in my bag, and I was like,
"Where did they get it from?"
Thanks for nothing.
I
wanted candy.
The Simpsons Futurama crossover crisis. I'm sorry.
Oh my God, this is a crisis episode.
Oh, we did it.
It is a crisis.
It is a crisis. It's a total crisis. And they know it. Like, they are deliberately making overt references to like the crossover tropes, the comic book crises, all this stuff. It's great. It's great for Simpsons fans, Futurama fans, and comic book fans.
You should title this The Book You Never Knew Had a Marvel and DC crossover in it.
That's true, yeah. Or The Biggest Crisis You Never Read. Ooh. That'll trick them. And people love to be tricked into watching YouTube videos.
There's one thing we know, is that people love being tricked.
Oh, yeah. People get mad at us
watching things
for,
they don't want.
People get mad at us for just giving them what we promise.
Yeah.
This is the premise of the show.
I hate you! I had a comment just the other day that was like, I'm about 6 minutes and 20 seconds of this episode, and I can't for the life of me understand why you would make a show like this. This doesn't make any sense. You better not blah blah blah. And this, and then like an hour later, he wrote another comment that was like, I have completed the show and I understand the premise and I will give you a like, but I will not subscribe. I will never watch another episode of the show, but I respect what you're doing. Goodbye.
Thanks
for the engagement.
I love it. And it's worth buying. I'm sure it's out of print by now. There's no way. I got this for a song. And I guarantee you can't now. I'm calling it now. You know what? Let's use the credits moment to find out.
Yes, let's.
You'd be like, this is worth $300!
Put that down!
Quick, we have to showcase it in diamond!
That's right.
is the idea that like Diamond is so cheap and
Nah, it's like $30.
Oh, well, that's
Okay.
probably similar to cover price.
Oh, it's
That's
actually
a hardcover.
No, yeah.
Oh, it's a hardcover.
Oh, you can get it for a lot cheap. Oh.
Oh.
Yeah. All right. It's in the comments. You can buy it.